everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. My slate is not quite correct, I don't think, so I'm going to not tell you what we're doing because I don't know. So anyway, so we'll get into that in the second hour. I'm not sure if that's what we have there, so we will look. Anyway, so sorry, I got lost there. If you've got questions, we've got a great panel. So this is an excellent panel for the it's a big panel for a lot of times the holidays picks up. Everyone's got a little extra time. Chris has got an open mic, and it's we're in the break. We're in the summer break. Go ahead and throw those questions in. You can throw them into Makana and vote on them. If you're not at Makana, you can ask questions at askofficehours.global, and of course you can ask those questions any time of the day. 727 45 24/7, I think is the number I was looking for. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one today comes from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. And Mike says, morning, everyone. Doing the math, does a panel think the cost and IOs for the base model Mac Mini Pro with 4 Thunderbolt ports is worth it for virtual production compared to the vanilla base model Mac Mini, which only has 2 Thunderbolt ports?
Who do we have up? I lost my page here. So,
Jason Bass starts us off this morning.
Go ahead, Jason.
100% yes. If you're using a Mac Mini for production, you should absolutely be getting all of the I/O.
There you go. Chris Fenwick. Oh, go ahead.
Good. Go ahead, Chris.
I absolutely, and I'll tell you, I just bought one. We bought one for one of our editors, and I'm configuring it right now, and it's a sweet little machine.
Guy?
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say buy 2 of the cheap ones. So that's what I'm using right now. I've got M2, just picked it up at Costco, $549, I believe it was. So I have a just base model, but the nice thing is I could use 2 of them. But if you're doing serious horsepower activities like editing, you might need to have a powerhouse, but I'm running Memo Live on one, and then the other one's kind of more of a workhorse, just plain NDI studio monitor machine. So it just depends on what you're doing. I have a bunch of other machines, too many to mention, but then I do a lot of stuff in the cloud. And so like over the weekend, I was doing production and I was just using remote desktop, excuse me, to control units up in the cloud, and Splashtop as well. So it just depends on what you're doing.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with Guy. I think a 2-port would be fine. I run all of my stuff here for Zoom and the show on a old M1 Mac, and it works fine. So if you need more ports, you can always put one of those Satechi port devices that allows you to go up to 4 ports. It's the same size as the Mac Mini or OWC's version of the same thing.
And Nigel?
Yeah, to me, it's a sort of question of the $500 difference. It makes sense if you're trying to really minimize your footprint, make a really small environment where you really don't want multiple machines. If you're really not constrained by the environment, if you're really not needing 4 Thunderbolts to go into one machine for some production reason, then I would go with Guy's 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah, I have a couple of both, and I would say it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I think that most of the time I only need the base ones, and so I don't have a lot of in between. Like, I don't think there's a reason to get the one that's like $800 or whatever. There's the Pro, and the Pro is going to give you the 4 Thunderbolts. So if you need that extra connectivity, you have 4 Thunderbolt controllers as opposed to 2. So that may be something that you want. That's more monitors, more other things like that. But otherwise, I have on my stack here. I have 4 of the really like the base models and 1 of the Pro models. So anyway, so that's something to think about there. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. Andy Carluccio has posted a detailed message with an update regarding crushed blacks with the ATEM UVC output in Zoom, and he's got a link there to it.
Go ahead, Nigel. Or Courtney, sorry. I threw it right in.
Yeah, I looked at
what's going on?
I looked at the missive from Andy, and it appears that if you have the latest version 5.17.0, which I
517, I think is the one.
5.17.0. Yeah, 517.0. I have 5.16 right now. Otherwise, I'd show you the test pattern he put up. I can show it to you, and you should see it, what the problem is, but I don't have the latest version. On this test pattern, you should see the word test in the white area at the top. But because the black magic is kind of crushing the dynamic range on its UVC output, with the previous versions, you wouldn't be able to see it. But what they did it with Zoom is that they now detect the black magic's UVC output and alter the input levels to accommodate their misinterpretation of the contrast range. So it should fix maybe the crushed blacks only on the output to Zoom. It'll stay crushed on the outputs to other things, though. So they've kind of compensated for it in the Zoom software. But I don't know. Do you have the latest version, Alex? Can you put up the?
I'm hesitant to always not right before a show, so I'll install it later today. I once updated Zoom right before a show, and it was not a great experience for me. So now I go, oh, and then I just go, like I'm just going to wait until after the show. So tomorrow we'll do it. Right now, of course, mine has a little bit of a LUT applied to the camera to make that adjustment, and it's but it's going to be a big deal to be able to have it to have it fixed here. Of course, it doesn't help anybody who is in Teams, but that's not Zoom's problem. so anyway, so Teams and Google, and I do think that it may be a really hard problem. I think that Zoom probably undertook this because it's probably a very hard problem for Blackmagic to fix, and I'm not sure they can. So we'll find out. So I think that given how long we knew about it and how long it took for Zoom to fix it, I don't think this was a trivial problem. Like, I don't think that this was just like, we'll add a LUT. I think that getting this to work on Zoom's side was probably a lot of work, and we really appreciate the attention to detail, because I don't think anybody else is paying that close attention to the quality. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, 5.16.10 is the current version. It's up there. I checked it just before show. 5.17 is not up yet, but Andy promises it sometime this week. And just to reinforce what was said, this will only affect how your ATEM interacts with Zoom, because Zoom is checking to see if your ATEM is connected, and if so, it goes through that adjustment. And Alex, get ready to change your LUT once again.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about it is that it's also going to. I promise to use it in every meeting. Use it in every meeting when I go into Teams or something else, and I'll be like, wow, I feel like my blacks are really crushed. Zoom fixed this, and Teams hasn't. Like, this will be a constant. Like, oh, it actually is a really a strong sales point to needle everybody else. Shame and ridicule. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think this falls under the category of fixing problems versus solving the problems. Clearly, what Alex has done with his LUT is he's fixed the problem, but the problem is still there. And what Andy's doing with the good people at Zoom is they're fixing the problem, but the problem is still there. And really, the real solution would be, why can't Blackmagic fix it? You say it's really hard. Maybe it is. I don't know.
It may be impossible. Like, I don't know if it's possible.
How could it be impossible?
Because
impossible is a really big word.
Can you apply a LUT on the program output of the computer? And it's not clear. I don't know if they have. So there's nothing
the
in
USB
these
output as opposed to
the USB output. No, but hear me out. There are no proc amps in the ATEM Mini. So there are no. When we make changes to color in the ATEM Mini, we are making changes to the camera. This is what I love. This is my big wish list. On the wish list of things that an ATEM Mini should have is a proc amp on every input, but it doesn't exist right now, which means I don't think that there's I've thought about this a lot, because I was like, why is Blackmagic not taking so much time to do this? And I think that the reason that they're not doing it is because they can't. And I think that if they could, they would. And I think that this is a pretty big deal for their hardware, because we've seen it not only in the ATEM Mini, but everything that has that UVC chip. So everything that's going to UVC is a problem.
So I would go one step further and say, fixing it with a proc amp is indeed fixing it. It's still not solving it. What you're saying is the UVC chip is bad math in it.
I think that the chip that goes from 422 to H.264 is not doing this correctly, and it's not an FPGA. It's not something that can be flashed. It doesn't have firmware. It's a little chip that does this, and I think that they got themselves committed to something. Then they put it into hundreds of thousands of pieces of hardware, and they can't unwrap that. Like I don't, and I could be wrong, but I don't have any information from Blackmagic about it. No one wants to talk about it. So the thing is that so I don't know that for sure, but it seems like Blackmagic's definitely aware that it exists and it hasn't been fixed. And Blackmagic is generally very good at fixing things that aren't, like, if it takes software to fix it, that's what they do. This is something. So if they don't, I'm not clear that they can. I think that if they could, they would have. And I think that if they could have, I think Zoom might have given them enough pressure to do it as well. It's not like Zoom's not talking to Blackmagic. So I don't know what the deal is, but I will tell you that I'm really excited that Zoom did what it needed to do to make it work for its platform. But I'm not clear that there is the solution that you're looking for. I don't know if there's sometimes, so another example is AJA has an FS2, which is a lot more expensive than these little minis and these UVCs. In the FS2, one of the things that we found is that if you scale, if you change the frame rate or scale from 1080i to 720p or scale from 1080i to 1080p or whatever, your pure colors, your red, green, and blues, if they were near full saturation, they would posterize. And it took us a little while so not posterize, but you would get these stair steps. And we realized that somewhere in the FS2, it was going to 422 or 411 in the color to process something for that scaler and then coming back up again. And the result is that we were losing a bunch of color information. You didn't notice it when it's desaturated, like in the regular day-to-day stuff. You don't notice it because it's not pure color. But in pure color, you saw these stair steps. So you couldn't use an FS2 with Verizon. Just in case you're wondering. So anyway, you couldn't scale. You couldn't scale Verizon, T-Mobile, both of those. You can't use an FS2 to scale because you get these. People were like, "Why is my logo all jagged?" What? Yeah, I didn't do DHL, but I can tell you from personal experience that T-Mobile, no, yellow's not a problem because it's not pure green, pure blue, pure red.
Okay.
We only saw it in the pure colors when it was a single. And anyway, but lot of consternation, and it turned out that hardware was not capable of doing it differently. It does not exist in the FS4 or FS HDR. So the first thing we did when we got those boxes was test it. So sometimes you get into a situation. This is why making hardware is hard, because you make commitments, you buy chips that you buy, and sometimes that you can't fix it. Like it's just not fixable. And again, I'm still using an ATEM Mini. I still really like my ATEM Mini. I still don't think that there's anything competitive with it. I'm not changing what I'm using. I'm just knowing that, like there's an Ethernet port in my 12K that I know will never work. Like I know that it's never going to be. It's been years now and it hasn't been updated. I'm pretty sure that that's just it's an ornament. But I still like the 12K and I love using it. So it's not, you have to take all the limitations with the good stuff too. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. It's probably the manufacturer of the UVC encoder,
which is not. It's probably not Blackmagic. It's a chip that they bought. So you're talking about
the chip that they're using is because there's always been a lot of. This is complete conjecture on my behalf, but I've run into this problem in many situations when writing drivers. There's a difference between signed integers and unsigned integers, and it's 1 bit difference. That top bit gets interpreted differently as the sign instead of And so if they're using that signed integer, they only have 15 bits to work with and a 16-bit word. So that may be what the problem is. And so they're losing, a portion of their dynamic range to the sign and the integer. That may be what's going on there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
To be fair, there's a lot of devices out there that crush their blacks. The question is, does the average person notice it? Yeah, it does happen. There are differences between the codec they might be using, and some people actually crush the blacks just because it makes them look a little bit better or a little more contrasty or not. It's up to them. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying it's out there. It's not the only person making a mistake.
There's a lot of hardware that has limitations based on the chips that they put into their things. So you're absolutely right. There's this one has been a specific one, and the problem is that we were able to measure it pretty quickly, and so we've been this has been bouncing around. This and the fact that the Blackmagic switcher stops connecting to any device every once in a while is also another. Those are the two big known things.
We've been group shaming them for a while, so it's not like they can't do it. Yeah. Yes, they can't do it.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the fact is, there are a lot of encoders that crush blacks, and because they're using cheap hardware and cheap chips, and they're sending compressed MJPEG video out, which is what the Blackmagic switchers seem to be. I think what Blackmagic needs to do, obviously, design is all about compromise. So they decided that they needed to meet a certain price point, and hopefully in the next version of these ATEMs, when they refresh them, they put a higher quality chip in there that will do YUY too. I mean, and I'll just show you here quickly on my Roland encoder, and this is why I use it too. The Roland encoder can do fully uncompressed video, and in fact, it even gives you the option: do you want compressed MJPEG or do you want YUY2 uncompressed? So again, it's and for me as a consumer, I would happily pay just let me pay an extra $50, $100 if it means better quality video.
You could do that right now. You get a Blackmagic mini recorder, put it on the HDMI output, and it will be, and you can bring uncompressed into the Mac. It'll come in. The problem is that there's a whole bunch of UVC. The reason that you need it to be in the compressed format is there's a bunch of UVC software that can't see that. They can't deal with they need you to deliver it as a webcam, and so that the compression there. But again, the way it's being scaled isn't correct from a color perspective. But the reason I can't do that is because I'm using both of my. I could do it if I was using if I went to an SDI and used my SDI version of the Extreme. I'd be able to. I have 4 outs instead of 2, but the 2 outs here I'm using, and so I can't flow those back into that. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington's up next. What's the least expensive Dante-enabled audio mixer with motorized faders?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, the least expensive one that I've discovered is this new Yamaha DM3, which retails for a hair just under $2,000 US. Even the cheapest, smallest X32, by the time you add these expansion cards, it gets very, very expensive. And these expansion cards are very expensive. So far, I haven't found anything cheaper that has Dante straight out of the gate with motorized faders, 16 channels, for under $2,000.
And I think it also depends on the day and what price what is the X32 rack going for now? Oh, that doesn't have motorized faders though, so then never mind. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the DM3 is, but of course the DM3 is made of unatanium right now, so it's like trying to get one is you can wait for the next 6 months. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, make sure you get the DM3-D, which is the Dante version, not the DM3-S, which is about $400 cheaper.
And that's how much the Dante license is. So anyway, that sounds that's what, if you wonder why don't people put Dante into everything, that number is why they don't put it in everything. Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes of Bronx in the New York area says Adobe and Figma called off their merger today. Better or worse for the industry? And he's got a link to the story.
Go ahead, Liberty.
I feel like Chris right now. It depends. No, wait, that's Jason. Sorry. It depends. So the whole issue behind it being called off is because over in the EU, they're like, listen, the creative industry is like $60 billion, and that's 75 billion US, 101 billion Canadian. And by Adobe taking over, by Adobe acquiring Figma, it's just going to, it's basically trying to stop big tech from gobbling up and cornering the market market. So from that perspective, yes, I think that it's a good move. I know I've got a lot of friends who use Figma, so I can imagine them being excited because when the news came out, they were like, just a lot of cringe in the creative community. But on the other side of it, it's like, oh, you were about to get Adobe money, like the things that they could have done with that infusion of cash. So we'll see how they pivot, how they make another move, or maybe there are some concessions that can be made down the line that will make these regulatory moves easier to facilitate because Adobe and Figma, but mainly Adobe, has figured out a way to say, hey, this is how we will prevent any issues coming down the pipeline in the future. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I would say that it will feel like it was better for the industry to have Adobe not take it over. But in this case, I think that Figma gave up a lot. Not gave up, but the industry lost a lot by not having Adobe not incorporate all the generative AI, all the integration with all their software, all the integrate. There's a whole. They can do some of that integration on their own, but there was a lot there.
They've started to, like Figma has done.
They have.
That's why I'm like interested to see. Okay, Figma. Now you've got some legs under you. What could that mean?
Yeah, I think
them?
they could do it, but I think that on the surface, I would agree with you that it probably is better for the industry to leave it outside because it's going to look at more things. But I will say, not just the money, but Adobe has a bunch of technologies they're not going to put into somebody else's app that they would put into Figma if it was there. As a user of Figma, I would strongly, and I don't say this very often because I'm trying to move away from a lot of Adobe products. In this one case, I would strongly prefer to have this inside of Adobe, and I'd be happy to pay a little subscription for it because, because I know that it would make the product a couple times better, than with inside of Adobe. So I think that the user is paying the price on this one. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the users are going to have to pay that $1 billion write-off that Adobe's going to have to take as part of their parting gift.
No, the user's not going to pay anything. Adobe's just going to.
Somebody's going to.
Well, Adobe's going to pay for it, but I don't think we're still paying our subscription. I don't think they're going to increase it. The $1 billion is not that much for Adobe. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, every company faces the buy, build, partner model here. I think they were trying to fast path them way into buying it. They're just going to build it. So they're not going to partner for this feature. So in the long run, it will just destroy the value for the other side because Adobe's going to get there.
Yeah, Adobe needed to have this. I think I agree with Nigel. Adobe needed this product in their line. And if they're not going to have it, if they're not able to buy it into that line, they're going to build into that line, and that's not going to be great for Figma. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. For the AM for Every Vehicle Act fell short of being passed in the U.S. Senate amid opposition. Considering the state of the broadcast industry today, do you think AM radio has a future?
Go ahead, Nigel.
At some point, you have to cut the chain with the past. You have to go forward rather than backwards. And I think this desire to continually protect a dying piece of technology because somebody politically has a desire to do so, it goes away. I would think AM would be much better if we could give it to universities, if we could give it to schools, if we could give it to non-profits to use for local broadcast rather than big corporate megalopolises. But it's going to come at some point. We're not going to FM either. We're all going to go to an IP-based radio system. It's just a matter of time.
Go, Bill.
The original technical difference, of course, was that FM is relatively line of sight. So your transmitter has to be up high and then you reach the whole city. But if it runs into masses, mountains, even big buildings in some cases, it doesn't get through. AM, on the other hand, radiates in so universally, and it also hugs based on ionospheric bounce and a bunch of other things, can hug the earth and go a long, long way. So purely in the world of emergency management and things like that, I'm a little bit sad if it turns out that AM radio as a transmitted format for information goes the way of the dodo bird, because right now, if we ever do get into one of those EMP situations or something else where there is a tremendous need for public service communication, AM right now is still better than anything else we've got. Maybe shortwave will take over, but nobody has those receivers. So that's the only circumstance where I'm kind of sad to see AM go too far away if it does.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's still 82 million Americans that are listening to AM radio. So that's a lot, and I probably hazard to say that most of those are in automobiles because very few people listen to AM at home, but occasionally I will on a portable radio. And rural America, in areas where there may not be FM broadcasters nearby, the AM can be picked up over longer ranges, like Bill said. And it was also used as the basis for the emergency broadcast system. They've gone to different methods now, but there are still clear channel stations in the United States. In the event of an emergency, they pump up their power to extend their coverage range to include a large area, which no FM stations can really do. So I think it might be, and of course a lot of portable radios, like you say, can tune in FM, but a lot of those stations won't carry very far. So for emergency broadcast, AM is the way to go. So I think the reason that the car manufacturers are leaving it out of their cars is because as we go to more and more electrically powered cars, or the CAN bus powered electrical system in a car, it interferes with the AM radio reception, and they have to build tuners that are immune to all that, and they have to do a lot of filtration to filter out all that noise that's generated in the car by the car's electrical system. So I think that's why the car manufacturers are not putting it in their cars. But too bad they didn't force them to do it with this bill.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, the Senate is going about it the wrong way. They're trying to resurrect a dying technology and not doing it correctly. If they really wanted to legislate something, they should encourage the Federal Communications Commission to create in-band AM digital, which would eliminate the main problem that AM has now, which is a lot of noise. There's a lot more noise out there, which makes it less listenable, regardless of where the signal goes. There's so many things around you, power supplies and lights and things like that. So the idea here is that in-band digital AM would be useful. The government has been trying to help support it by offering AM stations a transponder on FM, so that they have a way of supporting the content that comes on the AM. But as a delivery message or method, it's not so good anymore. And there are other ways to get AM content. A lot of the group stations are putting their AM station on their HD1 or HD2 signal. So if you have a high definition or HD audio in your car, then you have a way of picking up that AM station much better.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would like to announce my candidacy for the 2024 election, and my platform is, instead of AM for every vehicle, it's going to be Starlink for every vehicle. Elect me president, everybody gets a Starlink.
and along with that, we're going to get rid of daylight savings time. All right.
I'm in.
Next question.
Philip Oler in Katona, New York. What do we think about the YoloBox Ultra for live production? NDI inputs. And he's got a link there.
Good guy.
Yeah, in this realm, I'd also be looking at the Magewell Director Mini. I'm proud of YoloLive for coming out with something with a beefier processor, because the original one was a little underpowered, and we used one at our church. We still do. It's great for just single camera, pushing out an RTMP stream. Works great, rock solid. But I sold a ton of the original YoloLives and had people return them, and it was just a product that I couldn't really stand behind or endorse and tell people to go out and get. This new one I'm excited about. It does have NDI. It does cost, I think it's $99 to activate the license. It is NDI HX3, so it's not full bore NDI. So it depends on what you're doing. I might just say get a laptop with vMix. It's just one of those things where how expensive is failure? If you're doing high school sports or something like that, where the bar is really low, that's probably a cool device. You tap on the screen, you cut between multiple sources, send it multiple places. It's got bonding, which there is a fee for bonding, so you can put multiple modems. I would say buy it from somewhere where you can return it if you don't like it, and test the heck out of it before you put it in a real production.
Yeah, we tried the YoloBox, and stability was just not there. Like, we just could not get it. We just never had the confidence that we could use it in a product. So we had it here. We've tested almost not every version, but almost every version, thinking, because for a while it had some features that we wanted, and we just couldn't get it to be stable. And so we were just like, we'll pass. Hey, go ahead, Alex.
only had one experience with it with the first one, and it was not good. I was helping a troubleshoot.
We seem to have a theme here.
Yeah, I was helping a church that bought one. I felt really bad because they spent all this money on it, and they didn't have it for that long. And the unbalanced 3.5 millimeter audio jack started buzzing like crazy, and it was not anything to do with their setup. We had a transformer isolated converter box that was converting balanced to unbalanced, and everything was fine there. But the audio input jack just broke; it just died.
Yeah, and that's the issue is we just had it wasn't one thing. It was just every time we tested it, something else wasn't quite working, and you just kind of see. I think sometimes you see what I consider a feature-oriented company versus I'll talk about this a lot. Oh, that's a feature-oriented company as opposed to a stability-oriented company, and I lean almost everything towards stability-oriented companies. So there's people who just like to add a bunch of features to it, and that feature-oriented means that you can put something on there, and you can tell people it works. But I always think of there's one of my favorite movies is a movie that almost no one's seen called Joe versus the Volcano. It's a very early Tom Hanks film. And one of my favorite scenes of any movie is the guy yelling into a phone just going, I know you can get the job, but can you do the job? I know you can get the job, but can you do the job? And they can get the job. The features are getting the job. The stability is doing the job. And I think that YoloBox, I think they would have to have almost a top-down or bottom-up reorganization of their company to build hardware that we could use. That's my opinion about them. Next question.
Next one comes from Zach Stahl-Smith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm looking at implementing QLab into my workflow. What are the pros and or cons from folks who have used it?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Here's a quick pro. I like their tiered pricing system. Everything they have works great. And the other part is you don't have to buy it all at once. You can buy little audio or video or all the other things that it can do, and it does them all well.
They're incredible. It's incredibly powerful software. It's Mac only, so if you're a PC, there's a downside for it. If it's Mac, there's an upside for it because it means that they're only writing to your platform. So that usually, from a Mac perspective, that will work better. And so they'll use up a lot of the Mac opportunities there. A lot of flexibility, a lot of interoperability. So those are things that work out. It is a Swiss Army knife for playing things and sending cues and putting things out. It's a really, really, and we've had them on the show before. Really powerful. For me, I can't use it for some of the stuff that I do because it doesn't do 10-bit. And so 10-bit video is something that it doesn't do. That is a super minor problem, but it does limit some of the stuff because I need a lot of my work is in 10-bit is part of the spec. so 422 10-bit is a part of the spec of my delivery output. I almost nobody would run into that, which is why it's not there. I will say that it takes a little time to get your head around how it's doing playback. And one of the reasons that when it first came out, we were really excited. I have to admit that it took me years to come back to it because it did one thing that Playback Pro didn't do, which is it could play two movies at the same time, which terrified me because I'm like in events and I want to only be able to play one at a time. Once you understand the workflow, it's not a big deal. But it was something that definitely was a big concern of ours is being able to accidentally send out a video, and more importantly, audio during a large event. So, but that makes it great for theater and a lot of the events that it's actually used in. It's really we use it for events, virtual events, and lots of other things. It's also really obviously great for theater as well. Not as deep or as heavy as Isadora. So Isadora is what we run the show on. And so I don't think we could run the show the way we do Isadora inside of QLab. It's just a much more, but it's also the QLab is a lot more approachable, I think, probably from day one to just get the things done that you would typically do in a show. If you really need to dig further in, I would also look at Isadora. Next question.
Matthew LeCount in Oakland, California. How usable is NDI on Mac? I see Bridge missing from NDI Tools. What other differences from the PC version?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it works great on the Mac. Depends on what you want to do. I mean, it works great with Wirecast, Livestream Studio, Mima Live, NDI Studio Monitor. One thing that is pretty cool also is MIDI. You can do NDI playout. So if you're just doing playouts, or if you're doing screen captures, those are great uses. But yeah, it is missing a few things. Like on the PC side, we get webcam inputs or out. in. No, it's in. So we get 4 versus 1 on the Mac, and the Mac seems to kick out 1280 by 720, not a full 1920. Bridge is the big one that's missing, and that if you're wanting to bring footage in and transcode it, so sometimes we'll use it to transcode from full NDI to NDI HF to do that on a PC. That's about the only big limitation, but the PCs are pretty cheap, so depending on what you want to do. But I like vMix on the PC with NDI. I mean, I've got, if you saw my NDI network, it's pretty crazy. And then we use it extensively in the cloud because it's much cheaper to use the instances that are PC instances. The Mac ones are super expensive. So our infrastructure is all vMix in the cloud used NDI.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Indianapolis, Indiana. Any other suggestions for an encoder with pass-through and recording? I need something I can program and mail out to clubs. And he's got a link there to a Zowie Tech unit.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, please don't. Please don't. You want something that you could control, because if something hits the fan, you want to be able to remote into that thing. The two that we use, Magewell has the Ultra encode, so then you could reach out and you could start and stop records. You can do updates. You can do things like, so this weekend we got hit by a copyright flag, and luckily our Pearl Nano is recording on site, so we're able to recover. Today, Monday, they're going to recaption the thing and they're going to re-upload it. But having the on-site, on-prem unit that can record and that you could control from the cloud. So Epiphan Pearl Nanos, they're a lot more expensive. They're about $1,600. They'll save your bacon, but if you just want something that could send up a feed, I mean, you try your luck with those. They're $149. I'd just be scared if you're up there before a show and something happens and the client puts, like, we can switch from NDI, or we could switch from XLR to SDI audio on the fly. So things like that, like somebody plugs in something different at the last minute, we can switch the audio from the cloud. We don't have to physically tell a tech. So it depends on who's going to be there. And so if this is low risk stuff, that might do the trick for you. Just make sure that somebody's there that could just unplug it and potentially maybe get a VPN so you can isolate that thing and maybe control it that way.
And the other one that we've seen, I haven't used it as much. I tend to use a lot more hardware, but one that we've seen that can record and encode is the Monarch. The Monarch HDX, I think, are ones that we've seen other people using, where it has an SD card on the front that it can record. I know that with some of the other Monarchs, we have the companies that we work with have a lot of remote control over those hardware, and they're about $1,000. I don't know.
No. Monarchs. I think I know which one you're talking about.
Monarch
the Matrox, because I was thinking
Matrox,
of them. There's $8,000 Matrox Monarchs. There's Pearls are like $1,600.
Yeah. So I don't have enough experience with the Pearls. I just see them. We just worked on a project where we're looking at deploying 250 Monarchs. I just know that and those are part of a larger pipeline. So anyway, that's, I just only know. I didn't really think about it until I needed to spec for them. Anyway, next question.
David Brady in New York up next. What's the thought of digital content you've been leasing becoming delisted and no longer accessible to you? I've been reading more rumors on this trend, which is why I prefer ownership to sublease. How will this trend ripple through software?
Liberty?
So I put this as a question because I was kind of wondering if he was referring to, because if you are using platforms like Instagram, like there has been just this big wave of people saying their content's not being seen anymore. And the thing that we need to remember is these platforms are created with a very much of a freemium model. So you get to use this, you get to create content, you get to build community, but eventually they were going to go to paid, whether that be the advertising, whether that be now being verified. So I am definitely with you, David, in saying owned always. So any of these platforms should be used as a part of a larger picture where you're driving people, whether it be to your website, to your email list, or to some other community that you've paid for and that you own. And I missed the last part of the question where you said, how will that ripple through to software? So I'm going to defer to someone else of how that might play out in software.
Good, Nigel.
So Saturday is Festivus, which is your chance to air your grievances. This is a good chance. This is a good subject in the airing of grievances to discuss this issue. If you project yourself forward a few years, everything will go this way. That we don't like it, we're not happy about it, we don't want it, everything's going to a recurring revenue model. Because when I go to sell the company, a recurring revenue model has a higher multiple than a non-recurring revenue model. And that is a fact of life, and we just should prepare for it.
I can say that I've had a product company, a subscription company, and a service company, and I by far prefer the subscription. Like as an owner, like it was. We didn't grow it to be big enough that, but the thing is that it was, the amount of the from subscriptions. The thing to understand is that the curve is so slow. Like when people leave, the only thing that the mistake we made, which created a hiccup, was changing the credit card processing, which meant everybody had to sign up again, and that was brutal. It was not one of our better moves. Rookie move, I know. Anyway, but if you leave people alone, you'd be surprised at how long. I'm actually going through at the end of the year. One of my end of the year things to do is I carefully go through all of my credit card things. I'm not a big credit card reader. Like I don't read all my statements every time, but I carefully go through and look at what I'm getting charged for, and I just delete. I'm like, why am I still subscribed to that? And why am I still subscribed to this? And so I slowly weed out those things. I've now gotten to the point because of that if it's a small service and I can't get it on the app store, like through my Apple, my Apple stuff, the chances of me subscribing are almost zero because it has nothing to do with the product and it has nothing to do with the App Store other than on the App Store, I can open it up and see all my subscriptions and I go expire, and just go down and I have more control over them. As a result, I'm become very resistant to doing it any other way because I was getting charged for $30 a month for something that I signed up for 2 years. I used it really hard for 3 months and then I forgot about it. And I suddenly realized I'd paid another $500 for it. So I get more and more sensitive by the minute. A lot of times what I do is I subscribe to things I've talked about this before. I will subscribe to something on my iOS device or on my app device. I'll wait 1 day because it does this weird, like it'll jump you out, or I'll look at and I'll unsubscribe immediately. So if it's monthly, yearly, whatever, I'll unsubscribe immediately. That way I have to remember or decide that it's going to be worth continuing to go forward. So I can use it for the length of time that I just paid for, but it'll just turn off automatically if I'm not using it. And I found that saved me probably a couple $1,000s a year. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and as far as will software go the same way, it already has. It's been going that way for 20 years. If you own any piece of software, let me put that in air quotes, if you own any piece of software that has any type of digital rights management on it, if they turn off that verification server, you can't use your software anymore, even though it works perfectly well. The 10-year-old version, I don't need any new features. Quicken did this. Quicken did I bought the version of Quicken, and they put a thing in, and the version that came out 15 years ago does everything I need, and they made minimal improvements every year, and I never needed to buy a new one every year. But every 3 years, they would turn off the ability to download your information for your bank into Quicken. And you had to buy a new version of the software. You thought you owned it, but no. If you want to keep using it, you have to buy a new version every 3 years because they turned off that little spigot that lets you update the software with your banking information every 3 years. So, and a lot of software, like I say, the verification that does digital rights management to make sure you're not duplicating that stuff and putting it up on the internet, all of that has verification servers that have to be online, and after so many years of disuse, they will take those servers down and you will never be able to install that software on a new computer again. So you don't technically own any of the software that you probably have.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
David, first of all, thanks for your QR code question. I'm going to take digital content, meaning also when you rent or you purchase a movie, say on Apple TV. And I've heard rumors that sometimes programs disappear from that. I can't confirm that, but I've heard people tell me that. But I am concerned with the consolidation of the TV services like Paramount Plus merging with Showtime or HBO and Discover with Max now. Whether or not something that you knew was always there is no longer there and available to you, whether you rented it or you purchased it. It could be a fear. I can't confirm any of it right now, but it's getting to be a very complicated world.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you want to know the value of your monthly subscription, times it by either 36 or 48. So typically the break-even point for a subscription service, a recurring revenue model, is 3 or 4 years. So if they're charging you $10 a month, assume that's either a $360 or $500 value, and that's what you're buying, and you shouldn't assume that it'll last any more than 4 years.
Bill?
Just me, but I look at this whole thing as an opt-in versus opt-out payment system, and I look at it from the point of view of me as a consumer. I try as hard as I can to keep away from any model where they charge automatically, and I must opt out of their system, and sometimes they put some barriers in the way to doing that, as opposed to this month, do I opt in to pay for this or not? And it touches on subscription, but it touches on a lot of other things too, insurance policies and things like that. Once you have to do something to opt out of paying, that alone is friction. And it's friction that people end up paying thoughtlessly over and over for things like Alex articulated, and I run into the same thing. I forgot about it for 2 years. I didn't use it, and I'm still paying for it every month, and it drives me crazy.
And the worst part is that you do it aspirationally. You go, oh, I know I'm going to use it next month. I'll leave it on. You know, I spend a lot of money that way too. Like, I'm going to use it next week. I'm going to use it next month. I'm going to use it next quarter. And I've just learned to just turn it off. And if I need it, I'll come back to it and turn it back on again. I think that in general, what's happened is that we all got caught into, we didn't have tools or mental muscles to manage subscriptions. And the downside of subscriptions is we're all getting pretty good at it now. Like, I know I'm getting pretty good at it. Like, I didn't have the process to like have lots and lots of software subscriptions and manage them. Now I've gotten really ruthless about it. And I look at, like, if you put a subscription in front of me, I look at, like, I set up timers and I just didn't have workflows on how to minimize how much I spend on subscriptions that I now have, you know, calendar events and reminders that are, you know, so if I don't do it inside the Apple whatever, I put a reminder that literally it'll be like Monday at 2:00, cancel this subscription if you're not using it. Like, you know, and so I put those out there so they show up for me and I go, oh yeah. And I go in and I get rid of it. And by the way, I put the URL where I need to cancel it into the calendar event because sometimes I can't find the emails anymore. I can't figure out where to go to cancel it. And so I put that in when
it's not just subscriptions. Think about how many hundreds of millions of dollars have been wasted on gym subscriptions in the real world that people signed up for a year and then went for 2 months and it still keeps hitting their bank account over and over and over again. It's crazy.
Next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Anyone found a route to control Homekit products through their Stream Deck?
Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, I have been. I've had a lot of good fortune with a utility called. You go into the Elgato Marketplace, and then you choose shortcuts by Sentinelite, and here that is right here. And basically, what it lets you do is here's a shortcut that I built for some lights. I said, hey, if this light is on, then turn it, or if this light is off, turn it on, and vice versa. So I can change the lights here in the room. And then all you do in your Stream Deck is you drag the shortcut over into your Stream Deck. You choose the shortcut that you'd like to toggle, and now you've got a button.
That's great. Go, Jason.
Absolutely the same. CJ's answer was perfect.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Kame Treble in Midlura, Australia. Just adding to yesterday, all I want for Christmas is my ATEM Stinger button to work. Of course, I'll settle for my usual Christmas coal.
And again, this is coming in from the QR code. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, you can make it work. You could hook a Scarhoy up to it and have some very expensive remote button system. But for the most part, I have found no use at all for the Stinger button or Sting button on my ATEM.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they never connected it to that function. The other ATEM, but other than the Extreme, actually have the Stinger function that works. I think they never put enough memory in the ATEM and the Extreme to really execute a Stinger properly because you have to be playing back a video, and it only supports a small number of video frames in the memory locally inside the extreme. So that's why I think they never implemented it, because they just didn't have the hardware inside the machine to pull it off to any extent by being able to do only one stinger at a time.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, you need a VTR to make a stinger useful. That's all there is to it.
Well, I mean, we've used a lot of stingers. I mean, we've done a lot of stingers in larger ATEMs. When you say ATEM, there's a lot of larger ATEMs that we actually use stinger. But you can see that in the if you look in the ATEM, even the extreme, just doesn't have a place to load video, so you wouldn't be able to do it there. And I have never tried to do it with. I mean, you can also do stringer. You can do stingers with an hyperdeck. I mean, you can do these longer things, but we never do that. We always do it loaded into the machine. So yeah. Anyway, I would say that. Probably not going to get it. One thing about Blackmagic I have found is generally after the first 6 months, there's some of the buttons and some of the connections might be aspirational. Next question.
Yet another QR code link question, this time for Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. And Bobby says, did anyone hear anything new coming out of Siggraph Asia this past week?
I didn't even know it was happening. so the marketing there probably didn't hit. I'm sure the marketing was great in Asia to cover those things. It's not typically the timeline that people would start doing announcements. So you're probably going to see announcements coming up in the first week of January for CES, and then you'll see the audio announcements start to trickle out in January and February. You might see Blackmagic now has spread it out, so you'll probably see between February and April, you'll probably see one or two events where they talk about what they're doing. But yeah, December is not a good time in most parts of the world to release a product. There's a lot of people thinking about a lot of other things. And so I think I'm curious as to why Siggraph Asia, I don't think was always in December as I remember it, because I think they asked me to speak there one time, but I don't, it's a hard time to do an event. Like it's just a hard time to get people to show up. They're busy. They're doing a lot of other things. What's interesting is we found that it was easier to do virtual events in December because people aren't interested in. They just want to go watch things. They don't really want to work, especially this week. And so so you'd end up with this kind of slow movement there. And so that sometimes doing these events in the middle to late December were advantageous, but getting people to go places not. Is hard. So next question.
Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida is up next. Recommendations and considerations when selecting a portable power station for a mobile cart for live events. Up to 60 minutes powering a virtual field trip using a cart, laptop, mobile data, and so forth.
Good guy. Yeah,
you might want to get one of those kilowatt things that Courtney was recommending the other day and measure exactly what your load is and what you're going to need. At Zoomtopia this last year, we had a cart with our computer, camera. This thing's called the Ivy. It's a teleprompter. We also had Keenan's disaster group, and then we had an EcoFlow underneath, which I believe is this one. It's on sale right now. Because it was originally $1,000. So this is the one that I'm looking at getting as well. It's $549. They had some crazy Black Friday deals, and it looks like they're still going. I'm looking at that one. I'm looking at Geniverse, Jackery, and there was one more brand that came with some solar panels. I can't remember the other name, but yeah, do your research and again, buy from some place where you can return it if it doesn't, because you might want to go to the next level if that one's underpowered. That's why I say test the load, and you want to test it at maximum pull too, because sometimes things heat up when if you're using processor intensive applications, that when they get fully throttled, they can pull more power. So you just want to be careful. We were just using a NUC, so it wasn't pulling very much power. I don't know if you're using a full-on computer, and then monitors, of course. We're using one small 10-inch monitor on our cart, but yeah, do the kilowatt thing and measure, and then it's math from there.
Go, Bill.
Yeah, Alec, it was just mentioned, math. To me, one of the most important days of my early career was when I figured out how to add amps in terms of a group of equipment and measure that against the power draw and what I had available, particularly as we moved more and more off of shore power onto batteries. And as batteries evolved over the course of time, I mean, we were back in the old days, and Anton Bowers and big V-mount systems. And then things kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the current draw on cameras and other things in the field got smaller and smaller. The big change was when the lighting moved mostly to LEDs because those draw tremendously less power than the old tungsten filament stuff I used to use. So you have to keep up with it, and learning that basic math of paying attention to the specs on the back of every piece of equipment, wall warts and everything else, and look at what their current draw is, add them up and figure out the capacity you need. And then, as Alex always says, build in additional capacity above the number. You want headroom, because if a momentary spike turning things on or some anomaly in the power system, and you can go down because you haven't got that margin at the top end.
Yeah, to just underline that, I would not go out with a power supply that wasn't capable. If I was doing up to 60 minutes, I would have something that could do 120 minimum, but probably 180 minutes across my gear. And that's what I'd be looking at. I wouldn't be looking at something that goes up to 75 minutes. So you want a lot of headroom, because you just heat also. So one thing that you have to be very careful of is heat, how warm or cold it is, especially if it's cold. That makes a huge difference in how efficient your batteries are. We've had cold things where everything suddenly was running 25%. Also, we had locations that just burn up our batteries, and we don't know why. Like we were in Napa and we literally had a location where the batteries were all lasting, for whatever reason, half of what they normally do. And we had a lot of battery issues because of it. And a lot of granite. Like we don't know why, but it was we had a lot of radio signal issues, and we had a lot of and a lot of battery issues, and we couldn't quite figure out what the deal was there. But we didn't want to stay there because we were like, whatever's affecting the batteries, it might be affecting us. Go ahead, CJ.
A lot of batteries also will rate their total capacity and the amount of watts that they're able to support, and a lot of wall warts will not give you the watts. So just remember West Virginia with your power, because watts equals volts times amps, WVA.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm building a DC system, extended DC system for the truck with Keenan, and one of the things he told me is he said, make sure the amp hours of the battery, cut it in half, because you really can't use the other half of it. So I'm putting a 200 amp hour LiFePo battery in the truck with solar panels on the roof.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Why do you think many application vendors abandoned incorporating distributed processing capability into their apps, like Logic's Logic Node in the Logic Pro 9 era? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, Douglas, I'm not sure what you mean by many other application vendors. I'm curious how many have abandoned stuff like this, but it could be a couple things. I mean, first of all, doing stuff like this is hardly trivial. From a software development perspective. The other thing, too, is also when you have very specific use cases, these are often power user workflow type things, and that's often a tiny, tiny percentage for some companies in terms of like total customers that are going to use these features. So they have to weigh the pros and cons of continuing to develop these types of features here. I mean, you even see this with Apple too. Why did it take so many years for them to develop a new Mac Pro? Again, there's a market for it, but in comparison to the average Mac user, average Apple user, very tiny percentage.
Go, Jason.
With the advent of Apple Silicon, I've yet to have an audio-only based task that requires distributed computing, period.
A lot of it has to do with the processing power as it relates to the networking speed. So as our processors got a lot faster, we just don't need it as much. So we didn't need to do it a lot because there was a lot of processing time, and the networking cost didn't cost that much to move it back and forth compared to the processing time. But as the processors get faster and the networking stays relatively the same for a lot of these computers, it didn't make as much sense to be constantly moving that data back and forth because the processor could do it on its own. So that's what we've seen in the past as far as what might be affecting some of that. We're going to be talking about presentations here in just the second hour here, so stay tuned for that. A couple of quick reminders coming up here. Today, of course, we're talking about presentations. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Apple Motion. Alex Goldner is going to be back, and we'll be answering your questions about Apple Motion. So if you've got, we talked about lower thirds last week, not yesterday, but last week, and we'll be answering more questions about Apple Motion on Tuesday. We're going to talk about audio scopes on Wednesday. So we'll be discussing what are they, Why do we need them? Like what is it? What are the so we'll be talking through that process there. Thursday, John Barker and Lucas Herman are going to be on, and they're going to be talking about the new Rundown Studio. We're really excited to see what John has put together with Lucas, and they're going to talk about the run of show. It's a run of show tool that they've been working on for quite some time, and we're really excited to see it. I don't know a lot about it other than I looked on the webpage and it looks amazing. So we're going to check that. They're going to be here to answer your questions and talk about that in the second hour. And BitFocus Companion will be the subject of Friday. Andrew Broughton will be here to show us the power of Companion. So that's going to be coming up on Friday. Of course, Saturday and Sunday are Q&A, and we are going to do something on Monday. Just in case you're wondering, some people were asking. Yes, we're here every day. And now we're going to start talking about presentations. A lot of us do presentations. There's more than one company. They'll tell you that a presentation, how you move ideas forward is with a presentation or it's a deck or a demo. Like you have a demo, you demo something that you're doing, or a deck, and preferably both. That's where you really have it. And one of the things that I think that one of the reasons I wanted to cover this a little bit is to talk about different approaches and how different folks here approach building decks. The one thing that I will say is that I think that learning how to build decks is probably more important than learning how to write long papers in school at this point, because you go to large corporations, unless you're working at Amazon, because I think you don't have to write a lot of prose. I mean, everything is decks. You just see decks and decks and decks and decks and decks. A lot of them are bad decks, which is what we're hoping to talk about a little bit here. But they are a lot of decks, and this is how you move ideas forward. There are teams not only for external presentations, but for internal presentations, just to build the decks. So a division in a lot of these larger corporations will have their own deck preparers that will be there to to answer those to basically, you'll give them your basic deck, and then they'll build it out so that it's prepared, so that it can actually you can actually talk through it. One of the things that's interesting is that for me, when I really started thinking about decks really hard, was that I was building them and I was pretty proud of what I was doing. And I spoke at WWDC in 2007, I think, and there's Duarte is a company that builds decks. Like, that's one of the big things that they do. And they work with Apple to build their decks for WWDC, and there's a team there. And I worked for weeks. I mean, like 8 weeks on my presentation. It was the best presentation I had ever produced. And I brought it in the day of the event. You meet with them earlier in the day or the day before or something like that. And they looked at it and they said, "This is really great. I mean, this is one of the best decks I think almost anybody submitted to what we're doing. Is it okay if we just tune it up just a little bit?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Do whatever you need to do." And they just tore the whole thing apart. Like, just ripped it all apart and put it all back together. And then it was a great deck. And there were a couple things that just kind of like blew my mind. Number one is there was almost all the text was gone. They just weeded it out, put it all in the notes. And so there was just, they were like, "Are you reading this?" I mean, because I asked, I said, "Well, what are we going to do with the text?" They're like, Are you planning to submit this as a book, or are you going to talk about it? If you're, and I was like, I'm going to talk. And I go, "Okay, well then I think we're going the right direction." Like, they were really nice about it, but they were all there was a little bit of a like tweak. And so there was a little bit of them telling me, you don't need to put a lot of text in there. You're talking over this. These are the illustrations that you can't show while you're speaking. Now, people will talk about decks, and there are needs for you to hand something out. I will say that I build separate decks or I build prose around it. So it's very common for me to have two versions of a deck. One version of the deck has all the text in it that you can just read and go along. It matches the deck that I presented to you, but it does not. The deck I present, I talk to. The deck that I hand you has text in it. One thing's important. One of the reasons that I do that is that I may decide that I want to talk about an idea, but I don't actually want you to be able to copy it and send it to a bunch of people. So you can have the pictures, but now you have to remember what I said. And so I do it for both security processing, a thing, as well as so I choose who I'm handing that off to. you'll see in the stuff, some of the examples that I show, there's almost no text. It's not that there's no text, but there's almost no text. These are images that support what I'm talking about. They're not images, and I'll show just a couple of them, just so, and then we'll hand it off to the rest of the team here. One thing that I will say that I'll show you that I find when it comes to presentations that I find important is, let me hold on a second here. One thing that's important is that I cut a bunch of stuff out of a slide, and that now it doesn't work as well. So hold on a second. Is that let's play that. There we go. One thing that's important is that I do this, which is you'll see me do this. So you can't see anything; just went white. My presentations are always on a separate computer. so I present through my switcher, and I always present, if I'm presenting over Zoom, I always present on a second computer. And the reason I do that is because sometimes I want to cut back and forth between me talking and the second and the presentation. So I'm talking in the presentation. So I want to go, so for instance, I will go, okay, let me, here's the issue. And I cut to this, and and then I go, find my button. So this is, this is here. But while this is going, I may want to cut back to you and talk to you for a little bit. And then I'm going to come back to this and talk to this. And then I'm going to come back to you. So I'm going back and forth between me talking and the presentation happening. I also have another computer that I use for the applications. So if I'm going to show you something in an application like Cinema 4D or Photoshop or whatever, that's another computer. And the reason I do that is so that I can very quickly jump between them, and it makes a much more interactive event. It's much closer to what we're used to in broadcast. Now, another thing that, so there's my kind of I use a lot of transitions, but here is I'm showing a timeline. Now, that's just a wipe. That's just not very complicated. And now all of these, I'll talk about this a little because a lot of the examples that I was talking about the progression of media. And these are simply cube transitions of me talking about things. And then all those images actually, by the way, are created in Midjourney. Over a plain white background is my favorite thing to put in a Midjourney when I'm building little examples of stuff. I don't have to try to figure it out. I just ask for things. I make a couple hundred of them, and I pick the one I like. There's this. What's happening next? So that's that's what I have here. This is me talking about how much we get to choose the people who are around. We don't get to do it with, we talk about the growth of what you're doing. But again, comical, an image over a plain white background, in this case, using the same seed in Midjourney so that I get images that look the same or look like the same person getting older. And again, you'll see that kind of presentation. I move in and out of things. So in this case, I know you'd be surprised I'm talking about communities and what communities might there. So you can see me kind of bringing those in as I talk about it. So almost everything I do, the one thing to notice is that you'll hear me clicking. So if I go here, I'm talking about this, then I'm talking about that, then I'm talking about that. I am not showing you the whole slide at the same time. I will never show you the whole slide at the same time, because people are listening to you or they're thinking about the slide. They are not doing both. I want those visuals to pop up while I'm talking. And then I can maybe spin it. And here's a whole bunch of more examples. So you can see how I brought it in. I started with a handful of things that I want to talk about, but then I can go, but there's a lot more. And that's just another transition within Keynote. And this, me talking about people being confused and frustrated by something that they're using. This is three confused people with glasses on, looking upset, in the style of Pixar. In Midjourney. so it's fun. I can spend a lot of time looking for these, or I can just make them. This is another example of, I had this animated. I don't know why I didn't animate there. So that little circle around the interactive view normally is animated. I don't know why this slide deck didn't do that. And then, I was talking about how trolls ruin everything. So this is, again, multiple things, but I'm animating all of these things out. So you'll see that I'm popping each one up as I talk about it. And then that's me dropping them down. Now, what's important about that is that, let's see here. Let's see what's in, go to a full screen so I can see what I'm doing. Is one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to is build order. So you'll see that this is something that a lot of people don't use. This is my holy grail for how I build things, which is that I pay a lot of attention. I have these things. You'll see that these are moves in, moves out. They're all connected. If I look at these, this is going to be a build with for. Sometimes they're after for. Sometimes you'll see me. Let's see here if I can grab one of these here. You'll see these delays. So you'll see a little delay. It says this is going to go with build for, but I want to delay it by 0.02 of a second. So this is a very, very, subtle move. Now watch what happens. It's because what that is, this is all fine, but you'll notice that the guys that fall down, they're all just a little different from each other. They all kind of pop, 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 like a little cartoon. And so that is so I live inside of that build order, like how it's going in, how it's going out. I connect everything together. I build all those things out. Now those little adjustments make a huge difference in how it feels, to do that. Now, the final thing I'll say is that I can cut between things, but I also have this telestrator on top. The telestrator that I somehow turned off. I'll get back to that. Anyway, so I usually have a telestrator over top of it, but it's broken right now. When you build these presentations, and you combine the ability to switch back and forth, the ability to get to your presentation or the application or anything else you want to show, the ability I playback deck as well, but I didn't have anything for it today. But being able to do all those things, and I have to admit that I approach this because I've worked on corporate events for 15 years. And so I was very used to it looking a certain way because that's the way all of our stuff looked. And I just wanted to reproduce that feel, but at home. And I will admit one of the downsides of what I just showed you is that I am incapable of presenting in person. So if I'm going to do that, I'm like, why don't we just hang out and talk? We'll just talk and give me a whiteboard and I'll draw on it because, and I can do a simpler presentation for someone that's cute off a laptop or an iPad. But I don't do it very often. Anyway, that's my little intro. And we'll hand it off now to, if you've got questions about presentations, go ahead and throw those in and I will throw it to Nigel.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of make 3 points. First of all, when you're an excellent presenter by Alex, some of this is really instilled in you from years and years of doing it. If you're new to it, I want to give you sort of 3 things to think about. The first one is, what is the purpose of the presentation? What are you trying to achieve? You've got to be really clear on what you want out of the presentation. And before you set pen to paper, set keyboard on light, be really clear about what you want to walk away at the end of the presentation. What is it you want to have happened? And invariably, I find people go astray is they don't do that piece of work. So they start down the track and they just start communicating without thinking about where they're going. Second of all is, what is your style? What makes you feel more comfortable? That you're trying to communicate, and therefore your confidence level is really important. Don't do something in a style you're not comfortable for. Don't make jokes. If pictures, you don't know how to talk to pictures, don't talk to pictures. You got to find something that makes it very effective in your style. And the last thing I'd tell you is what is the context of where you're going to be doing it? So are you doing it across Zoom? Are you doing it in a conference? Are you doing it on a stage? Are you doing it in a room? All of those change the nature of the presentation, as does how long you have. I first did presentations in the long mists of time when we used something called an HP pen printer, which I think was a 7475, if my brain remembers well. And it took like 5 minutes to print a chart. Let me tell you, you didn't create charts unless you really needed them. And you spell checked them really carefully, because one spelling mistake was another 5 minutes waiting for this to print out. What that gave me and what that taught me was to be really clear what I'm trying to communicate. Be really on point about the storyline before I start producing stuff. I think one of the big downsides of PowerPoint is you can get from 0 to 150 charts in 2 minutes, and then somebody else has to suffer through that. So be really clear on that. So think about the objectives, your style, and the context. But finally, presentations are not about what you want to communicate. They're about what the people need to hear. Put yourself in your audience and say, if I was in the audience, what is it that I would like to hear? Not what do I want to tell them.
Go, ZJ.
Yeah, I used to never allow a phrase or a sentence to leave my mouth unless I could directly relate it to the person that was on the other side of the table. That was kind of my litmus test for whether or not it made it into what I was saying. I really like to use a program like MindNode to map out what are the key points, what are the waypoints between where we are and where I'm trying to go that I need to hit along the way, and really write out that outline before I start making the presentation. I don't always stick to what the outline was going to be, because as I'm building everything, I find, oh, wait, we should go down this detour, or we should go down that detour. But I want to make sure that I don't get off track. Actually, one of the things that I love about presentations is because if I just open-ended start talking to people, I have the tendency to go off into tangents and little rabbit trails that detract from the overall what I'm trying to do. So I use the slide presentation or the keynote as kind of railroad tracks to make sure that I'm not losing the plot, so to speak. The other thing that is absolutely just takes what I feel takes my presentations to an entirely different level. I believe you can do these things in Keynote or in PowerPoint. I know that you can do them in Keynote. Is that I will, number one, I download Keynote for my iPhone or my iPad, and then I make sure that I'm using, if I'm physically in front of someone, I'm using Keynote Remote so that I can advance that slideshow and control it using the phone. It's pretty easy to set up, and I can show it if you want, but it allows you to do a little bit of drawing, similar to how you would do with a telestrator. You can have a virtual laser pointer, but the big thing is I can see what is my current slide, or what I prefer is what is my next slide, and then what are my presenter notes. Just in terms of, I'm always just that half a second ahead of the people in the other audience makes me look so much more polished when I can talk about what's going to be on screen. Half a second before it actually shows up on the screen, you just look very prepared and polished, and you're not the everybody's been in the presentation where somebody is reading off the screen, and that's just crushing because you just lose people immediately. The other thing that I do is I keep graphical elements and logos and formats of slides, and when I find something or maps with certain pins on them that I want to highlight every time, I'm really big into saving the masters, like making my own custom Keynote template so that I have some of my greatest hits or some of the things that I know I'm going to want to go to. I know I'm going to want a picture of this product. I know that I'm going to want a map laid out this way. I can just go into masters and insert it right in. And it's those little quality of life things to me that make it just so much easier to make a presentation than just having that blank sheet of paper.
And again, one of the reasons we want to talk about this also is just to really underline the fact that, decks are, folks who don't think decks are important or don't want to put the effort into them, I always hope that you're the one arguing with me in a meeting, that you're going to show your deck and I'm going to show mine, because decks are an easy way to move ideas forward when you do it effectively. I went into a presentation that had some government agencies and the World Bank and everything else, and I sat behind people who were much smarter than I am. Like, they were some of the top economists in the world, some of the everything else, and they did the most horrible decks, and you could tell everyone's like looking down, falling asleep. One did a deck in Excel, which I didn't know was possible, and I'm fortunately was the one that came after that, and I gave a deck that looked very similar to the one that you just saw, about production and why it is an economic stimulus and blah blah blah. I'm the one that got funded. like they had better ideas, because suddenly everything was the problem is that when you put a bunch of stuff up there, or when what you're saying is tied into it, or that everyone's reading, it adds cognitive load. It makes people tired. It's death by PowerPoint, and you want people to feel engaged and feel like they're excited about it. And if you think this is just for your clients, like, I just want to underline that I do decks for every show. Every time I talk to a client about a new show, a new idea, I do a deck. And I use it to explain where the cameras will be. I use it to explain what the things are. I do 3D renderings that are built into it. I do all these other things. Like, that's my pitch. And the thing is that I started off mostly, it's not just to sell things. It was there to explain what we were going to do and to make it a form of discussion. And it is, so I build a couple decks a week, typically, to talk about things with folks. And so it allows us to keep an idea. It's the easiest. I easily spend more time in Keynote than any other single application other than maybe Discord. Go ahead, Bill.
Everybody likes a good disaster story. I'm going to tell you the story of my worst presentation because it's instructive. First, a little tiny bit of background. I used to do a lot of road shows for Video Maker magazine when I was a contributing editor there. And so we would go around. So I had done a couple hundred presentations. They were rated pretty well. I thought I was pretty good at them. I was learning. I had a lot of experience. So I'm off for a couple of years, and then a local photo group asked me to come in and do a presentation to them. And I thought, they want to know about video. I can do this. And so I spent 2 months building what I thought was a fabulous presentation. And I was talking to my wife, who's an educator, and we were thinking about active learning and all these things. And I really spent a lot of time trying to craft this great performance to really excite them about the subject. And it all went to heck in a handbasket about 2 slides in. I got too fancy. I was asking too much of my audience. I was doing polls, showing marked up examples. They wanted none of that. What they wanted was just the core of the information. And every time I got to a slide with an activity, I had to dump it and just riff. So it completely destroyed the entire structure of my presentation. Basically, after I got out of that and did some soul searching, I realized I was trying to perform the deck rather than interacting with my audience and letting the deck serve as the organizational tool for that interaction. And that's what I came away from another disaster, a bad outcome with understanding. The deck is your organizational aid. It is not the central focus of your presentation. Your presentation is the focus. And being a great presenter is darn hard and takes a lot of work. One of the things I also came out, and Alex just mentioned this, and I think it's an incredibly powerful thing, poor use of the note space. You do want to take everything off the slides that are better for a trigger for you, and then practice relentlessly so that you don't have to keep looking at your notes over and over again to get that out there. You've got to form confidence that you're going to be able to, because you've rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, just talk to people and get all your points in there. I got down to reducing 3 to 5 points that the audience can take away is a win for me, not 30 slides where the information on 30 slides you're trying to get them to take away. They will never do that. You got to communicate that in another way. But you can empower them and excite them about 3 to 5 points that they will come on, and maybe it'll be useful. And the other thing is to understand your audience as well as you can. Try to get something in there for everyone in a mixed audience. If you have beginners, medium, and advanced people, try to give something to everything. And to Nigel's point earlier, I was trying to be the great communicator with all my experience. That is what I wanted, not what my audience needed. It was a terrible mistake.
And the thing I'm always looking for is I'm always trying to get people to ask questions and talk during my presentation. So some people want to get on rails and they just want to get through the presentation. But the problem is that people will switch to, especially over Zoom. We did a bunch of eye research. We track people's eyes. This is probably 12 or 13 years ago. If you talk for 6 to 7 minutes online, you will lose 75% of your audience by the end of that. So they didn't leave, they're just not paying attention to you anymore. If you put up a slide deck and talk to that, you have 90 seconds. And that's the math. That's up for hundreds of people looking at it. That's like lower brain, like they just can't, and I have to shoot people like in presentations watching these, for large organizations, and I just watch everybody looking at their phones, looking at their email, falling asleep. And so for me, the slide deck is only to build a skeleton that I can have a conversation with the audience, and that could be 2 people in front of me if I'm doing it over Zoom or whatever, or it can be 100 people. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering these days with the availability of HDR and big screen monitors and LED walls and projectors with 20,000 lumens that are affordable in conference rooms these days, why you chose 100% white as your background. It seems to me if you're cutting between yourself and your presentation, you're going to be blinding everyone in the theater. Is it because of the edges show up less, or what is your reason?
Yeah, it is. It's because the edges show up less, and it's easier to. So a lot of my decks, this came from it. My newer decks are the last 6 months of the decks have been mostly black backgrounds. I just can't show you those ones. It was easier for me to grab an older one to grab those out. So the issue is that. For a long time, I built decks white because clients would want to print them later. And so if you build a dark deck or a colored deck and you send it to them, no matter what you do, you send them a PDF of like, hey, here's what we did. And they print them out and they come out. Like what happened was I had to print one out to do some notes and it was over black and it came out, the paper was like wet. Like as it came out. And so that's what pushed me towards white decks was specifically I had lots of clients that were, and so I've been doing white decks for a decade because of that one experience of me printing one out and having this wet paper come out and realize like if you print a 50-page deck out, that's the end of that ink. And that ink is expensive and it's not like this is crazy. And so I started building everything on white decks because they printed and they looked a lot nicer because they printed out nicely and everything else and they weren't all wet. And so I went to that direction. Now I'm going back and it's really been about the last 6 or 8 months, I've been moving towards darker backgrounds because of this, that I'm only doing it over Zoom. I'm just showing you something old that was before I did that, just because the newer ones are not something I can put on YouTube. So but you want to think about that when are people going to print it? No one's printing them anymore that I know of. Like I don't see people printing the decks out anymore.
And there are choices in some PowerPoint or presentation software that allows you to. If you're going to print it, when you go to print it, there's usually a checkbox that says convert black backgrounds to white.
And I grab my pearls when you say that. Like you would actually change the way my deck looks before you print it out. I would never allow that. Like I would never. Like I would just be like, no. Like I'm very. I know you never think so, but I'm very controlling about how it looks. And I want it to look a very certain way.
No, we'd never think that.
I know you'd never think that. I'd be like, no way would I want to give people an option to turn a black deck white. I want to design it for that. If I think they're going to print it out, I'll go through the trouble of building another one. Go ahead, Liberty.
So many great points made. I'm going to come from a pitching to investors because I went through Techstars, if some of you remember, a couple years ago, and they are one of the most rigorous pre-seed investor accelerator organizations in the entire globe. So I was a part of the pre-accelerator for the first Women Founder Catalyst. And so that was 3 months of, first of all, getting our story. So we have our various startups and really getting our story out. So going back to what CJ said, that was getting all of our ideas out and then really writing something that during our the pitch phase, which was what we were working towards, was to draw on the emotion, to draw on the intrigue and having questions. Like so many of us went through the process of how do you grab them in the first 10 seconds, and that's even being generous. And so what is that statistic that you might have or a part of your story that you might share? And I'll just pull up, this is an old deck for the children's programming that we were creating. But as you'll see, as I scrub through it, there's not very many words, just a lot of pictures. And because this is tied to me verbally telling a story behind these pictures and connecting it to what's being shared. I'm not sure if someone has already said this, but your deck should also make sure that you're answering questions, especially we've all watched Shark Tank at some point in time. So you know that they're going to have questions about the money or the staffing and just making sure that you have, and I'll skip through to what's some of the traction that we've already received. And so And there's one more flipping through and like, okay, so where are you? People want to know like how far have you gotten with this product, especially investors. So making sure that you're answering some sort of question, but overall your pitch presentation is an experience. Like Nigel said that before, bringing your personality to the stage. I know I'm quirky, but then also really techie, and okay, I'll drop some comedic information and in my presentation. So when you are doing something to investors, really making sure, as Bill said, making sure that you know your audience and what they are looking for. Not all investors are looking for the same thing. So doing your due diligence so that information is there, and knowing that this is just the start of a conversation. Like, yes, you may be able to close with this, but this is something to really, you've probably done some conversations in advance, and now you're sharing more of your wins, letting them know you. It's a part of a tango, a part of a dance that keeps going until you get that yes, until they say yes or no, because sometimes it might be no. And even when they do say no, you find out why, and see what amendments you could make or answering those questions for them. So just really wanting to put that out there of Guy Kawasaki. I think that still stands. I'll try to find the link of his either 20 tips or whatever it is on your PowerPoint, making your presentations, but just really overall making sure that you're telling a really good story and being able to answer any objections or questions in the midst of it. So your visuals connect with your story.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, and along those lines, visuals connecting with a story is not just something you have to do to your a general public audience. This is a deck I did years ago about exactly that. This was just framing the talking points for a really complex product lifecycle, and it was just go around this and that and these. And this was only internal, but it was to sculpt the talking points about how this, each thing has an in and an out, and the audience never saw this. But what we found was it actually really helped consistency when various parts and departments were answering these questions, because it provided a framework that, everybody could kind of riff off of. Oh, here's the input and the output. Here's the input and the output. Here's the input and the output. They never saw this, and it didn't matter. That wasn't what it was about.
We're going to get to the questions here pretty soon. The questions are starting to stack up. Go ahead, CJ.
And with the overlying theme I have with all this stuff is just because you can doesn't mean that you should. There are a million different builds and transitions and lots of crazy stuff that you can do, but when used with intentionality, they're really powerful, but you can very quickly overload someone with too much flash.
Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, I've heard you say several times the story about printing an all-black presentation on paper. Since we basically never do anything on paper now, do you still prefer the aesthetic of a white presentation over a black presentation?
All of my presentations were black before I did that print years ago. They were all dark. I like dark, and so my new presentations are all over dark. And so the main thing is that it's where I'm converting most of my new presentations over dark, unless they're based on older ones. But I will say one of the harder things to do is, when you're cutting images out, it's harder the matting is harder on dark. So it's a lot more challenging if you're just grabbing stuff off the internet and you don't have SVGs or you don't have, other things like that. You have, it's harder to get them to comp well. So that it is more work, and again, Midjourney is a good example. If I do a plain white background, it gives me something. If I do plain background, it decides I want something very dark. The subject gets dark. And so it gets much meaner and it looks different. And so that's also a challenge. And so I do find it easier to comp things. One of the reasons I went to pure white is because it was really easy for me to just comp things and put in shadows. So shadows, having little contact shadows underneath things and stuff like that was nice. But I prefer the black ones. And one of the things that I think there's a question coming up that I'm experimenting with is starting to have a mixture of stuff. One of the reasons that I'm not going to go to pure black is that mixture of things where I'm having things comp over top of me and then other things that are filling up the whole screen. That's kind of the next generation of stuff that I'm working on. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
First one comes from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. Do you see value of showing yourself picture-in-picture while presenting a deck? And if so, do you adjust the key content area to not overlap where you might be?
I do some of that. I love the fact that Apple put the ability to put live cameras into Keynote. The problem with it is that if I'm cutting back and forth between a switcher and Keynote, the audio lip sync is different. So the Keynote one is behind. The audio gets ahead of the video because it's being processed. And so I actually can't use it. So sometimes I do use a pip to do that, very rarely. And the reason is that my aspiration when I put together a presentation, generally, if I'm going to present to somebody, what I'm doing, my aspiration is that it looks like TV. Like I'm building graphics. In fact, I oftentimes look at commercials and go, oh, how would I do that in Keynote? like how would I swing that around, and how would I do those things in Keynote? Because I'm trying to make it look like a TV. And when you do picture in picture, how many times do you see picture in picture in a TV show? Not often. So because I'm aspiring towards TV and not towards other corporate decks, I tend not to use pips. Now, I don't have a good example of it here, but what I am starting to do is if I want a little example, if I have this box and I'm going to connect it to this box and I want a little arrow to go across it, I'm doing more of that where it feels like glass in front of me. So I'm having boop, 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 and having the thing pop over and go to the next thing. It's really impressive. I will say to what CJ was pointing to, I've had people who, not so much overwhelmed, but I got to the end of the deck and they said, I don't know if I'm going to, buy your product, but man, I want you to build my decks. So they got caught up in all the weird things that I was doing that made it really fun, but they weren't listening to me talk about the thing that I was talking about. And so I realized I had gone a little too far over the board. But yeah, so you do think about the content. And this comes back to what Bill was talking about is rehearse. I rehearse a lot of the stuff a lot. So that I can, so that I know, oh, that's where that's going to pop up. So it becomes second nature. The other thing that I didn't mention before is that that separate computer is that you saw me reach over for it. This little Stream Deck is just that's my next slide thing. It's not that way I don't have to change keyboards or look for it. I just hit the button. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. How do you deal with client-provided template decks that do not look good? We've never seen that. Do you create your own deck from scratch or just smile and nod and use the client-provided template?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So typically, I'm afraid it's the second one. Unless they are paying you a large amount of money to present and then you can throw your toys about a little bit, you're probably going to use the template they sent you. And it's probably going to make your teeth grind. But the trick is learning to use it to still be effective. People who put conferences on particularly want a common look and feel. It's very old-fashioned, a common look and feel to the chart format. And they think it gives something, whatever they think it gives. But there's enough space practically on all of those templates to do what Alex and others have been talking about, which is use graphics, minimize the text, work out the storyline. Being more effective in their template will make you the most effective speaker at that conference.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I do. If you're going into a conference, if you've agreed to be in a conference or agreed to present with someone else, you've agreed to use their template. That's not like if they're going to hand you a template, I'll use whatever they give me. But because I use so little text, it doesn't matter as much because I don't have to interact with their fonts. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. If you're doing a 2-deck approach, live and a handout, what's your process to keep common content in sync?
I do them side by side. I literally, because again, sometimes the decks are white and the one I send you is going to be over white and the one that I do is over black or some other color or whatever. But I go through them side by side because I change them constantly. I will say the 2-deck approach, I haven't done a double deck for 2 years, maybe 3. No, before COVID. So almost 4 years now. So before COVID, I did double decks all the time. I don't double deck very often anymore. And so but when I did it, I'd set them both up and go through them both and make sure that the same slide is in the same place so that they have that there. And oftentimes you'll send it to them, and especially, the one thing I have learned to do is leave enough white space. Like I don't try to fill the whole place up with text. I add some text to annotate things. It's not like I wrote another page. If I'm going to write a lot of text on a slide, I'm going to open up Pages or Word pages for me, and I'm going to make you a brochure. And I used to do that for a living, so I know how to make, and there's some great templates in Pages. I open it up and I just start slapping stuff in, and I'll build a whole document for you that you can read. Like if I'm going to have you read paragraphs, I'm not going to put that in a deck. I'm going to just send you a brochure that has got 3 columns and pretty pictures, and I'm going to design it. And again, I don't do most of these lightly. I mean, I have a lot of, to Jason's point, I do a lot of this stuff where I have a lot of, you've seen it before. I mean, I've shown it in the past, but I've got a lot of templates, but I have templates that I use. I keep all my decks. I date all my decks, and I change the date every time I touch it. So every day that I touch it, I change the deck. So I've got, I can go back wherever I want. I don't depend on autosave or anything else. This is the deck, and this is where it was when I did that. It's really great when you go, oh, what did I do in that slide? And you can go back. That's what I did here is I grabbed the deck from, January, and I just ripped out a bunch of stuff and just kept a couple slides so I could show it to you. But having all the and decks are don't take up a lot of memory, so it's pretty easy to keep them around. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, I'm curious. Do you store your decks in a folder called "These are my presentations," or do you have a presentation in each job folder?
I have them in Keynote. The Keynote folder in my iCloud.
Okay, so they're available on any device.
I want them to be available because here's why: is that a lot of times I'm working on my main computer to build the deck, and but I open it up on another computer, and I don't want to figure out how to copy it. I literally, if I have it open, as soon as I hit save, that other one will just appear, especially when you're at home. The other thing is that the process that I use to build decks is a little different, which is that now I'm starting to use Keynote. I didn't really realize that Keynote had an outline structure that I could be using, which is that you build the outline, and it just builds all the slides for you. Like you just build the outline, and it just throws them all in. And I was like, oh, that's a lot easier than what I was doing. But what I did for years, or a decade and a half, is I go into Notes and I write everything. This gets back to what Liberty was talking about. Is that I want to make sure I tell my story. The biggest mistake people make about decks is they start building them from deck 1. They try to make slide 1 great, and then they make slide 2 great, and they make slide 3 great, and they lose the thread almost immediately when they do that. And so what I do is I sit there and I write an outline. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I build my sub-outlines that are there. So now I have an outline in Notes. Typically after that, I open it up in my iPad, and I open up Keynote in my iPad, and I do a split screen between my notes and and Keynote in the iPad, and I use my pencil, and I look at the notes and I go, okay, this is the slide, and I draw what I want. I'm going to have a little box here. I'm going to have this thing here. I'm going to go here. I don't want to get caught up in how I'm going to do that. I want to think about what I want it to be. Like you have to the hardest part of presentations is getting to actually telling the story that you want to tell, not getting caught up with the whiz bang or whatever. So then I draw everything, and then it just comes in as gobbledygook, right? It's just all these little weird sketches. I'm not a particularly good artist. So it's just like a lot of boxes and things, and this is going to little arrows, but I know what it means. Then I take it into Keynote. The funny thing is I don't do the next part because it's too hard to cut and paste images in and out of Keynote on the iPad, in my opinion. So then I go back to the Keynote on that. By the way, I just save, and then I go into my desktop, and it just opens up, and there's all my slides, right? And then I just start replacing everything, and I just mechanically replace everything that's there. And then I just start going through the slide deck. And once I replaced it with all the images, as I start to replace it, I go, oh, I really wish I had this. And so I add another animation. And then I start, as I go through it, I start connecting them in that so they all appear when I want them to appear and everything else. But again, I'm trying to think of it like a broadcast designer. I'm not thinking about it as a Keynote, presentation. I'm thinking about a broadcast that I'm going to do. And I do that for the smallest decks and the biggest decks, which, and I know there's a lot of conversations about, oh, why would you do that why would you do that just to pitch an event? It's because the average event I pitch is, my average event is like $60,000. Like I can spend the time on doing a deck. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago. Any chance there's a recording of Alex in a meeting using a deck that isn't covered by NDA? Be interesting to see the presentation in action. Maybe a lab or a deck off?
Yeah, so I'm going to be using Keynote for some stuff I want to put on YouTube. And actually, I did one already on YouTube, but I'm going to do more of those. I want to use it as kind of a test case of building content for YouTube with Keynote. And as a result, but what I'll do is probably start posting some of those, like, here's the deck for that, because I can leave it open and let people just look at it. Like, this is what I did to build it as I go. I don't know where I'm going to put that yet, but I'm going to put it somewhere so that people can look at the decks. And not all of them will be that impressive, but they'll show you how I did things to show things. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think it's an interesting discussion to have, Kyle. What would the what would the deck off be? Common, you'd probably have to give like a common pitch. Like, we're going to pitch, installing a playground at a grade school or whatever it is, and we need to raise $20,000 to do it, and then on your market set, go. 3 days later, whoever wants to join the competition.
It'd be really interesting to also give you a ton of images and a ton of examples and a ton of other things, but you only get to work from that. Everybody has the same.
Yeah, the grab bag.
Yeah,
right?
Everybody has the same. It's kind of like Master Chef, except it would be Master Deck. So we've now thought of a new show, Master Deck. And so let me really. The funny thing is that'd probably be pretty. Master Deck would be a pretty popular show, I think. It's really useful. Again, like, until you work with large corporations and you realize how they move ideas around internally, you don't realize how big of a deck is. You think of decks as like, something I went to a hotel and there were 80 people in it and I did a deck, or I put something in there. But in these large corporations, and I've worked in a lot of them as a consultant, it's how every idea moves. The people who are good at decks, their ideas get moved forward. You want to know how that feature got built into some piece of software? Someone built a deck. Like they built a deck that explained why that was necessary. You know why that building got built? Off campus. Someone built a deck to just So these decks are really, really. This isn't a minor skill. This is probably one of the most important skills, other than people skills. It's the most important skill in a corporate environment is to understand how to build a deck. It's super, I think people underestimate that. And man, they build really bad ones, because of that. Go ahead, Bill.
The deck off show, I love it. I think we need to model it after the Westminster Kennel Club. So we're going to have divisions. This is information on a white background. The other one is fundraising on multicolors. And then you get the winners in those categories, and then you look for best in show. It'll be perfect.
There's so many permutations. You could do the voice, but the deck.
Best
minions only.
I know that you're good at using white decks, but how do you do black? Let's see how you do a dark deck, and let's see what kind of design deck. What if this deck has to be in the theme of arts and crafts? Okay, how are you going to do that? Go ahead, Nigel.
Okay, so I want to go back a step. We've said it's a skill, it's a talent, whatever it is. If it's a skill, you get it by practicing. You don't get to do an Alex deck first time unless you're Alex. So I don't want people to get put off by showing the very greatest that the greatest people can do and have people go, well, I'll never be that good. What I think is important is you start doing it, you iterate on it, you get better every time. Don't only compare yourself to the best. Compare yourself to what you did last time. Think about what you did effectively and what you didn't do effectively and make it more effective. But you've got to practice. You've got to do it multiple times. You've got to repeatedly go after improving yourself.
And what I will say is that I'm a solid AAA deck maker compared to the people that I've worked with. I'm nowhere near pro. I couldn't stand up to the 88 mile fastballs, or even 65 mile an hour. I'd probably have trouble with. But but what I will say is some of the stuff that I hope people leave with is structure your deck well. That's the things that I'm doing. That is a minor. That's not a pro tip. That's just a basic tip of do an outline, roughly draw it, because the reason that I draw it with my pen is so that I don't get caught up in the details. I just want to know what I want. I don't want to get caught up in what font am I using, or what do I do a rounded corners, or do I do this? Like that, you lose the thread. The most important part of your deck is not losing your thread, and and having something that goes through. And then the other thing I would say is that we'll do more about this if people want to. I don't know, or we'll do labs or something. But understanding how your whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever. Really understanding how those tools work. Like Apple does these education, they do these events for educators, and anybody can sign up for them. Every time I sit in one of those, because they'll do Keynote for educators, every time I sit in one of those, and I've been using Keynote since version 1, they will do something that makes my mind just go, like just pop open. Like I was like, you can animate stuff on your iPad if you just grab onto the object and hit record and go like this. It'll save all that motion data and just do it in your deck back on your computer, like stuff like that. Like I was like, I didn't even think that was possible. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've worked on a lot of corporate presentations, but I'll tell you by who has by far the best decks, and they have a whole department for doing this, is Disney's internal sales meetings, which have done a lot of. Really good. And they have the
Not like they
animation
have any
department
talent around
generate
it.
animated characters doing reveals,
Yeah.
and the builds are incredible with magic sound effects on each of the, It is truly amazing to see what they can do, and just in internal corporate sales meeting.
Oh
they
my
spend
gosh.
a lot of time on those decks. I tell you,
Next
And
level.
I think that you should call it all hands on deck instead of master deck.
I will say Disney is, you don't get to see them, but they're really good. Yeah, good Liberty.
That was really good. All hands on deck. I like that one. I was actually looking for space to put this, so I'm happy you said that, Nigel, about the iteration, because it's just like for many of us who edit, or whether that be video or audio, the iterations, the first cut that you made is not going to be what you see on your timeline when you're done. And you're going to get so much feedback each time you pitch or each time you do your presentation that you will incorporate and, make it what it is to something you're super proud of. And then even then somebody's going to give you feedback that you'll be able to tweak. So just get out there and get started and iterate as you go along.
Go, Chris.
The thing about the competition is not only do you get to pit, 2 or 3 or 5 people, but then you make it an educational thing and you break it down and you have people talk about how they did or what they did. Also, Alex, you mentioned the whole thing about, getting lost in the weeds while you're building. I will say, I will self-admit, that's something that happens to me all the time. I bet you every slide deck I have has at least one incident where I was trying to tell the same idea 2 different ways, and then I was like, and then I end up hiding one. So if you step through them as opposed to play through them, you'll go, why is this in here twice? Oh, yeah, that was the one that,
By the way,
I ended up
that's
throwing out.
That's also why I save every day that I work on a deck, is because I can go back to the other days and I throw those slides away so that I don't accidentally think that they're still there. Like it's definitely because I have the same problem that you have, is that going through the deck can be, you can easily get yourself into trouble, because you're going through skip slides. And I'll sometimes have some skip slides, but I also, if I do a major presentation for somebody over Zoom, I schedule an hour of prep before I do the presentation. Like just, like to take it, like I don't, if I, and I'm setting up my gear, and I'll go through it a couple times. I'm almost always tweaking it a little bit. I don't really like the movement of that or how long it takes and so on and so forth. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. Is there a deck consulting service to refer clients to? Is this a possible use case for AI?
Well, as I said, I use AI to build a lot of the images that I use on decks if I want to entertain people. Be clear, like the images that I showed you, a lot of that is to create fun. Fun is really important because it re-engages people. Like if they chuckle a little bit or they think it's a little funny, don't try to be too goofy and don't tell jokes. But if you use it as examples, like jokes are like super dangerous. And so many educators and engineers and scientists seem to like them, and they never go over very well, like almost ever. And so, you're never as funny as you think you are. But having fun, goofy little things that pop up that are just enough to be fun, but not so much to try to tell a joke. They just lighten the deck a little bit, and it just makes it more fun to work in. Yeah, Bill, real quick, we're going to run out of time.
Deck presentation is a performance. I don't think AI is going to get to the point where it can actually perform for a while yet. There may be a future in that, but right now I think a human has to drive the performance.
You see a lot of stuff on YouTube that is a AI speaking. They did all the graphics, but the AI is talking. It's that one guy, Adam. Adam it turns out it's his name. Bill, are you Bill on 11 Labs?
No.
Wow. There is a Bill on 11 Labs that sounds enough like you, not exactly like you, but enough like you that we thought you put it up.
No,
you should check out 11 Labs.
I hope they didn't groom through all of the past office hours.
Well, you should check.
Bill.
You should check. Next question.
Let's see. Craig Kadoke, Toronto, Canada. Do you consider where you are presenting a deck when you choose the background of the deck? I've been watching this in a dim, not dark room on a 55-inch screen, and as Alex switched from his camera to Keynote, and the full screen white is painful.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes, you do wherever possible. If someone's giving you a deck, be very careful that you check whether there are copyright or internally legal restrictions. So we produce a deck template every year for our team to use. Not only do we change the copyright data as secure or restricted, there are often other things on the template you need to be sensitive to.
Go ahead, Liberty.
Great question, Craig. Typically, outside of like pre-done meetings or pre-scheduled meetings, I'm usually on the road. So on a mobile device, I'm very careful at what those graphics look like. So yes, you should always think about where the majority of your presentations are going to take place.
And remember that if you're using gradients, they will not look good on Zoom. so like online. So so be careful of it's one of the things that I try to move away from is gradients. That's why I tend to do all black or all white. Go ahead, Bill.
Alex's point about doing black slides and printing them and burning through ink cartridges is a sensitivity I am very much to. But I want black because most of my presentations are going to end up on a screen somewhere. So I'm trying to wean two of my clients off of the relentlessly bringing in large sheets of paper with their projects on them because it's really the worst way to do things. I want to be able to use white for highlight and use dark for get away from the words with the background so that the background disappears, but you can't do that if you're trying to do multi-print and screen.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, how can you make decks accessible to viewers with disabilities?
It really depends on the disability. I think that's the challenge. Is it depends on with all of these things, you have to think about what are you trying to adjust for, and I think that is it's really it's you have to think about through that, and and you have to pick which ones you're going to be able to manage. A lot of times, for a lot of the larger organizations that I work with, they ask you check a mark that says I have a disability, you tell it what it is, and they adjust like if you're going to come in and you need a signer, they're going to make sure they have one, but they're not going to put one in if you didn't check it off. so that's the thing to think about there. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Porco, Quitland, BC, Canada what is the make and model of the commonly used clicker remote for changing slides wirelessly?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I know there's a fancy one that I'm sure Alex will tell you. Mostly when I'm doing stuff, I use El Cheapo that I got from Amazon. It's $15. I can't even say a brand name on it. I would not use this in a large hall or in a formal presentation, but it's absolutely fine in a conference room or a small setting. If I'm doing it virtually online, then I'm going to use my Stream Deck and manage it that way.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I think, Alex, you always recommend is it the DSAN? That they use as the pickle. And the question is whether to get a 1-button, a 2-button, or a 4-button. 4-button, they can get in a lot more trouble if they hit the wrong button and take you out of the presentation. So
I think
choose wisely.
3-button.
3-button.
Yeah, I think when I use it personally, I have it, and there's one that will fit into your bag. It's a really small one. There's a big one that has a lot of extra features and has a big speaker, and there's a medium-sized one. I have all of them. So anyway, but when I go to an event, to speak, I take it with me and I plug it into my own computer, and it's just a lot more, especially in a crowded room. There's enough problems with USB ones that I've learned to use the DSAN. It's a little expensive if you do enough presentations. I don't need it as much anymore because I don't present in person very often. But
And put the receiver behind the screen or up near the presentation podium so you have the shortest amount of distance.
although
And up high.
the DSAN we've had
can
it go
cut through, but
it cuts through 300 feet. It's amazing. Up to 8 of them with different signals. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. What can be done in an org's base template to promote building better presentations?
Go ahead, Chris.
Craig, my belief on this is my goal with my clients is I call it quantify aesthetics. You know, it's very easy to have somebody look at something and go, yeah, I don't like it. But the problem is they bring their personal views into it, and on any given day, they may have had a fight with their significant other, and they feel like they're being crowded, and so things are too close together, and they go, those things are too close together, spread them apart, and their interpretation of what looks good on one day could be totally different. But if you quantify the aesthetics and you say, look, as a corporation, an image, we always want to use one image per slide. It needs to be this percentage of the screen size, and we should use no more than 4 words per slide. If you can narrow it down to that, you'll find that it stretches people's imagination to try and go, okay, well, how do I do this? And I'm not saying that you can get people to buy off on this theory very often, but it makes a lot of sense if you think it through. You should be able to look at something and say, this is why it looks good, or this is why it looks bad.
There's a template. You want to build a template, but a guide also. Like, this is how to represent this information. This is how we want to represent this information. These are the colors we want to use. But also like show them layouts of this is what it looks like. The template goes a long way because it automatically puts images where you want them. You want to make the easiest path is to follow the right design in that area. And then the most important thing is that a handful of the thought leaders in the company, if they start doing it, like if you and a handful of other people in the company start focusing on making great slide decks, people will follow it. Because they don't want to be, everyone wants to look good, and they don't. When you put up a good slide deck next to a bad slide deck, it becomes really clear pretty quickly for most people that they have a bad slide deck, and then they solve that problem on their own.
One of the worst features ever invented for PowerPoint, and also I think I'm pretty sure it's a Keynote. No, the ability to scale the text down when you put too much text in the text block.
Yeah, I agree.
The first time I figured out what was happening, I was like, what the? How is this possibly a good idea?
Yeah. The other thing, by the way, and we didn't get to this that I wanted to show, but I didn't get to it. I will just say it real quickly because we're out of time. I don't ever use bullets. Ever. And the way I do it, if I'm going to give you 3 things, I'm going to have 3 boxes that appear next to each other with little things that are inside, a little whatever, but I think of it as graphics. Bullets scream corporate, and so I will never use a bullet in a presentation. I'll think about how I saw it in Nova. I'll think about how I see it in NFL. I'll think about what those things are. But you'll never see me do a presentation with a bullet because it just screams I am not broadcasting. That's what I want it to look like. Last question, real quick.
Last one comes from Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. There are plenty of YouTube videos on how to avoid death by PowerPoint. Any favorites?
I don't really look at a lot of the ones that are in YouTube, but we'll take a look at it. But I would just watch a lot of YouTube, especially people where you don't see the video. They're basically doing what you can do in PowerPoint or in Keynote. And some of them are using those. And so it's a really, really powerful tool that, I would really highly recommend getting good at. If you're on a Mac, if you're on a PC, PowerPoint's great. If you're on a Mac, Keynote is the right way to go. It's incredibly powerful. Go to CJ real quick.
Your friends at Duarte have a whole YouTube channel chock full of tips on how to structure and how to build. So Duarte, Duarte.
I didn't even know they had
on
videos. Oh man, yeah, they're the best. And I think they have a book too. But they are I've worked with them a couple times, and man, amazing. Thank you to the panelists for a great first hour and second hour, and I can't do this without you. And thanks to the producers for all the great questions and conversation. No one knew that we could talk for an hour about PowerPoint or in Keynote, but it turns out we can because of all of you asking all those great questions. And thanks to the incredible team editing and producing the show every single day, and making sure that we get it done even when we're a couple minutes over. I'm trying trying to close it up. But thank you to everyone who manages it, who develops the pipeline, who does all the bits and pieces that we need to make it work. We traveled in the Tlaloc traversal. We traveled 33,000 miles. That's 54,000 kilometers, and that is 269 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into after hours.
Alex will do a video call. Use a bullet, go to PowerPoint prison.
I would love to.
That's right. You better roll doubles or you're going to be in jail for the next move.
Think we need a Keynote lab.
Yeah, we should probably. I think I was thinking about the problem is I was thinking about it being nuts and bolts about how to do certain operations in Keynote, and then I was like, oh, it's too much Keynote, so we should just talk about presentations. And then it got more philosophical than we were planning to. So
when Chris made his point about text slide size, though, I thought, oh God, I remember getting legal
there's
notes.
so many things.
It means a disclaimer.
Yeah,
and it needs to be at 4 point.
This once a quarter.
Be a series. I think that's what we just did. We started a series.
Yeah.
So this is a philosophical. Then we get the
this is the philosophical start, but like little tips and tricks would be good. So we'll think